Social function. Yeah. Peace, family. Y'all know who it is. It's Kari Lumumba, back once again, the progenitor of LumumbaSpeaks.com, a Black empowerment initiative where we believe we could gain a competitive advantage by always betting on Black. Back once again, we're going to have another conversation where we're asking once again a provocative question. And that question is, are nuclear families for white people, and do Black people still have family meetings? I decided to have this broadcast because I was reading an article that talked about, of course, the attack on the Black family. We know that this is a conversation that's been had for a while now, and we get into why many scholars believe there has been an attack on the Black family, and what different institutions throughout time of Black people in America have contributed to that. But also, this whole concept of the nuclear family being rooted in whiteness and Eurocentrism. So definitely want to be able to have a conversation about that. Make sure you hit the subscribe and like button, as well as the notification bell. We know a lot of people like ghost watch our videos, but we're pushing the HBO special, right? And that's the help a brother out special. We want to get to 1,000 subscribers, and we can't do that without, of course, YOU. So what we're going to do is give some people some time to come on. I'm going to already put the link in the chat if someone wants to come on, be part of that conversation, where we're going to have a conversation about nuclear families for white people, and of course, do Black people still have family meetings, right? I would just give my background. I, of course, grew up in a nuclear family household, a two-parent household. My parents to this day have been married for 45 years, right? So growing up for me, it was very normal. Even for many of my friends, they grew up in two-parent households, so where it was normal for us to have a very strong two-parent household dynamic that was structured, that was function, that was love, and there was order, of course, right? Back growing up, it was, hey, you be home before the street lights come on type of thing. But we know there's been a push. Many people would argue from the radical left. Many people would even argue from individuals who are feminists, and even many people would presume to be Afrocentric, that have argued that this concept of a nuclear household is anti-African, right? This concept of the nuclear household is Eurocentric, decidedly Eurocentric, and of course against the best interests, of course, of Black people at home and abroad. And so definitely want to have a conversation about that. And then, of course, the question is, do Black people still have family meetings? I can recall growing up on many occasions where we would have literally a family meeting. Father would call us into the living room. We would all sit down. And then, of course, my parents would disseminate information to us. Oftentimes, we weren't allowed to give our perspectives, right? But then oftentimes, of course, we were. And then we would have a conversation as a family about not only what took place or what transpired, but also about the values and expectations of those who are in the household. I know I've had a conversation with a brother once before where I said that the job of the patriarch in the family not only is to protect and provide, but it's also to model the behavior that needs to be practiced by everyone else in the home, and to set the cultural, and even if you believe in the spiritual expectations of the household, right? So Definitely hope we can have a conversation about that. Once again, the link is in the chat if you want to tap in and be part of the conversation where we're discussing, of course, nuclear families for for white people. Then, of course, do Black people still have family meetings? But definitely want to tackle this idea of nuclear families being for white people. So if you want to get some pushback, if you believe that is true, would love for you to come on, give your 2 cents regarding this concept. I would argue that I would say no. Um, we do know that the Black family has been under attack. However, if we want to keep it a buck, right, and we know the Black family has been under attack since the Holocaust of enslavement, also known as chattel slavery, where families were split up. However, what we do know is that even through Jim Crowism, even through Reconstruction, even through the First Nadir, that Black people valued family. And it wasn't simply because we were seeking to emulate whites, right? It's because we truly believed, and there's literature to substantiate this, that this was the way that you do develop a strong community, right? And that if you have to have a strong community, you first and foremost have to have strong institutions, and no institution is more important than, of course, the family, right? Before you have a strong church or a strong religious center, a strong school, a strong community center, you have to have strong households, right? And that when you don't have a strong household, children tend to engage in nefarious behaviors, and that puts stress on other societal social structures, right? So that's one concept. But I think also if we look at African history, right, we know that ancient Kemet was based on rooted in nuclear family. You look at Ethiopia, right, ancient Ethiopia, they had nuclear families. We look at even the great Western Sudanic empires of Ghana, Sanghay, and Mali. They also had, of course, nuclear families, right? And so even though they may have been polygamous in nature on many occasions, but there were nuclear family units, or you had nuclear family units in which maybe the father and the mother and the child lived with grandma or grandpa, so on and so forth, but there were nuclear family units. So even though there was a sense of community. So definitely hope some people could tap in. As I said before, the link is in the chat, and we just want to have a conversation about, of course, are nuclear families for white people? Then, of course, do Black people still have family meetings? But we can open the conversation up a little bit and even talk about, is the Black family actually under attack? So I would put that in the chat as well. Of course, if you believe if the black family is under attack, please share why you believe that is the case, right? So, as you know, here at Lamuma Speaks, we believe in facts over feelings. You take any perspective, but we do ask that you do not be intellectually disingenuous. That if you take a position, that you're able to undergird that position, of course, with factual information, right? I think that's very important. Many people would argue, why is that important? I believe, first and foremost, that if we're literally interested and helping the Black community, and then we have to do our due diligence, right? We would be remiss in our duty if we were disseminating information that was not rooted in the facts. Right? I don't think you can help any group of people if you're promoting and spreading misinformation, and we want to make sure that we're promoting correct information. So once again, as I stated before, make sure you hit that subscribe and like button. So we're having a conversation regarding are nuclear families for white people, and do Black people still have family meetings? So that's the question on the table today. As I said before, I was reading an article that literally argued that nuclear families was rooted in whiteness, and that the nuclear family literally was antithetical to the best interests of Black people in the concept of Afrocentrism. So definitely would love to hear some people's thoughts, ideas about that. I have my perspective. I've shared a little bit, but definitely want to get some people on here to have a conversation. So please feel free to tap in. Once again, I always tell people you don't have to cam up. You can simply come on, give your perspective. You could keep your camera off. But once again, we always ask that you make sure that you're focusing on facts over feelings, that the information you're giving could be substantiated, right? And so I think that is very important. As we know, we had some individuals on the channel on our platform before that made some claims that were patently false. And as I always tell people, if you make a claim that is patently false, I will cut you off, right? And it's no disrespect, it's all love, but just for my credibility, I have to make sure that we are allowing people to disseminate information that is factual, even if I disagree with you, right? So if I disagree with you, that's not an issue. Just make sure that the information you're disseminating is factual. I have a good friend of mine who actually is an integrationist. But as a result, what ends up taking place is when we have conversations, he makes sure those conversations are rooted in facts. And sometimes we can agree to disagree, or sometimes I let them know, hey, you got me there. I didn't know that. So very important here. We just want to make sure that we're having a robust conversation that's rooted in factual information. But as I said before, we want to have a conversation, of course, and the question is, are nuclear families for white people? And do Black people still have family meetings? As I stated before, I read an article that basically was arguing that the nuclear family was not only antithetical to the best interests of Black people, but actually was a site of harm to Black people. And so definitely would love to have someone come on, have that conversation, share their perspective. Once again, you could give your opinion, right? So I'm not going to push back against someone giving their opinion, but I think this is something that we see a lot of times from feminist groups, the radical left, even some bohemians who are against this concept and idea of a nuclear family and a family structure. I can state that growing up, I benefited greatly from growing up in a nuclear family structure, right? Two-parent household, as I stated at the top of the broadcast. My parents have been married 45 years. So we'd love for some people to come on, give their perspective. Once again, the link is in the chat, and I will put the link in the chat one more time if you want to come on. You don't have to cam up, and just share your perspective on your thoughts about the nuclear family. Do you think we need to have more two-parent households in the Black community, less two-parent households in the Black community? Do you think that the nuclear family model is Eurocentric? Then, of course, we can even extrapolate that into having a conversation about, is the Black family under attack? And or we can have a conversation about, this concept and idea of, do we still have family meetings? So I know there's some people watching the broadcast right now, so would love for you to come on. As I said, the link is in the chat. You don't have to cam up. Once again, you don't have to cam up, but would love just to have that type of conversation. You give your perspective, your opinion about the subject matter, and then we could take it from there. So the link is in the chat. We're going to stay on for a little bit more, but definitely want to have a robust conversation about, of course, is the nuclear family, is the nuclear family unit rooted in whiteness? Is it rooted in Eurocentrism? Is it actually a site of anti-Blackness, right? Is it antithetical to the idea and concept of Afrocentrism for Black people to engage in the nuclear family unit? And we know that there's even this concept many people have argued about, social fathers, right? So, and we could get into that as well. I'm gonna put that in the chat as well. Social fathering. Is this the way to go? So, hope we could get some people to come on and we can have a conversation, of course, about social fathering, nuclear family. Is it antithetical to Afrocentrism, African communal values, African family values? Is the Black family on the track? And then, of course, last but not least, do Black people still have family meetings? So, of course, this is LaMumbaspeaks.com, where we believe in always betting on Black. Make sure you hit the subscribe and the like button. I would argue that no, the nuclear family is not a site of anti-Black violence. I would argue that it's not antithetical to, of course, Afrocentrism, right? We do know that culture is fluid, culture is not static, and that there's a concept that Dr. Milana Karinga coined many years ago called adaptive vitality, right? And that's when you're able to adjust to changing circumstances without losing substance and essence. And many scholars link the when they do their historical survey, they are able to pinpoint the development of the nuclear family to the rise of the Industrial Revolution and mechanical labor, urbanized labor, so on and so forth. And once again, I think this comes down to being able to be adaptive, right? Being a willow tree rather than an oak tree, right? Being able to sway and flow with the wind rather than breaking when the wind comes. I do know in boxing, they let you know that if you get hit, they say roll with the punch. Don't just sit there and be rigid. Roll with the punch, right? And so I think sometimes that's what we have to do. We have to roll with the punches to minimize the damage that's taking place. So definitely hope someone could come on. We could have a conversation about the nuclear family unit. Is it rooted, of course, in whiteness and Eurocentrism? Is it a side of anti-blackness, anti-black violence, and is it antithetical to the concept and idea, of course, Afrocentrism? Uh, I argue that it's not. We know that many African societies, ancient and contemporary, are based on the nuclear family unit, particularly what the great Western Sudan empires of what Ghana, Songhai, and Mali. And of course, we look at Ethiopia as well as ancient Egypt, were rooted in, of course, nuclear family structures. So definitely want to have a conversation. Once again, you don't have to cam up to come on. You could simply turn your mic on and you could bloviate a bit about your thoughts about is this concept of the nuclear family, is the nuclear family a site of anti-blackness? And of course, is it antithetical to the idea of Afrocentrism? Then, of course, we can have a conversation about social fathering. Is this the way to go with 80% female-led household rate? Is the Black family under attack? And then, of course, we can close out with asking the question, do Black people still have family meetings? But I definitely want to be able to have a conversation about social fathering, right? This idea of men in the community playing a role in raising a child rather than the actual biological father. So definitely, if you're interested in discussing any of these topics, once again, you don't have to give your name, you don't have to cam up. Come on and just have a conversation. But I'm definitely interested in having a conversation about social fathering and this whole idea and concept of our nuclear families for white people, right? It's just a white concept, right? So once again, I'm gonna put the link in the chat. If you want to be part of the conversation, please do. But we're looking to have a conversation this evening about, of course, this idea of the nuclear family being rooted in whiteness, Eurocentrism, it being a site of anti-Black violence, and then, of course, it being antithetical to the idea of Afrocentrism, as well as, of course, tackling some other, I think, rather issues that are derivatives of that core conversation, particularly this idea of social fathering, the Black family, if it's under attack, then of course, do Black people still have family meetings? So I definitely hope we could get some people to come on and be part of the conversation, right? So if you're not here, you're being square. You typically say be there, be square, but I'm gonna say if you're not here, you're being square. So definitely, the link is in the chat. Come on and be part of the conversation. You don't have to cam up, but definitely would love to hear some people's perspectives. You can share even your background in terms of how you grew up, if you grew up in a nuclear family unit, or if you grew up in a non-nuclear household. But definitely would love to hear some people's perspectives on the concept, once again, of is the nuclear family unit rooted in whiteness, Eurocentrism? Is it a site of anti-Blackness? And is it antithetical to the concept and idea of Afrocentrism? And we could tackle some other issues as well, such as social fathering. Is that the way to go? Is the Black family under attack? Many people could argue historically that is the case, but many people are arguing nowadays that it's still the case now due to what the long reach of the prison industrial complex. I think that would be a great conversation to have about the prison industrial complex and the role the Black family plays in that. And then, of course, we could close out with, do Black people still have family meetings? I would argue, in terms of the prison industrial complex, and we do know that the criminal justice system is inherently violent. Inherently racist, right? It's violent as well. We do know that, but we know the criminal justice system is inherently racist at every level, local, state, and federal. This is a reality. And we do know that, unfortunately, Black people receive more time for the same crimes than their white counterparts. And we can even argue that many Black men are thrown in prison and jail on fallacious charges. We can even give a robust number, a round number, a liberal number of 20%. But we also have to be honest that there are many Black men and women. I see you, Brother Menelik. I'm going to have you tap in. Unfortunately, get involved in the criminal justice system. And as a result, they put themselves in those situations. So you can unmute yourself, brother.
All right, perfect. How you doing?
I'm doing good. How are you?
I'm well. Thank you for asking.
Yes, sir. So what are your thoughts? Okay, so we just lost you. Hopefully you could tap back in. Um, and so my thoughts are 80% of just say 80% of the brothers who are in prison and jail are guilty, then the prison industrial complex didn't take them from their family. They removed themselves from the family. I can recall watching an episode of Forensic Files. And on the episode, I will watch Forensic Files with my children. This is a legacy, or maybe a practice, I should say, that I got from my parents, and of course, even my maternal grandfather. And there was a situation where there was a brother. He had a blue collar job. He had a family, a wife and 3 kids. But at night, he was going around raping women, right? And so eventually, he gets caught and he goes to prison for life. And they're like, "Oh man, we lost our father." Well, the dad put himself in that situation. The dad is the one who caused his family to lose a husband and a father, not the prison industrial complex. Fundamentally, go right ahead.
Um, peace, brother. How you doing?
I'm doing quite
Um,
all right. How are you?
I'm well. So, my name is Menelek Alexander. I have been in a successful relationship for 21 years.
All right.
Uh,
Shout
I've
out.
been I've been married for 13 years.
Congratulations.
Thank you, brother. So, in my case, when you ask, is there such thing as a nuclear family? I believe there is, and I'm
Okay.
I'm proof of that concept.
Okay.
Um, I have 5 children. My
Oh,
wife,
okay. I gotta clap that up. But 5 is a lot.
right? So my age ranges are from 11 to 4.
Okay. Okay. So they're close
So
enough to where they have close knit relationships as well.
that's correct.
Very
So
good.
when you talk about, do we have family meetings, that is, we constantly have family meetings, whether that's where we're trying to figure out what we want to eat for dinner
Mhm.
to where we're going to go for an adventure. Do you
Right.
understand? And the thing with having a nuclear family, I have to realize that I've been very blessed to have the opportunity to even be a stay-at-home father,
Mm.
to
Okay.
be able to have that one-on-one connection
Right.
with my children, to where I don't have to send them to a daycare facility.
Right. That's a big issue because we also oftentimes, and we've seen this throughout, the mainstream media, even where Black children are being abused in daycare centers.
That's right. That's
Right.
right.
So, I
And
mean, yeah.
and that's the thing. Even within my situation, I was working a lot. My wife was working a lot, and my kids started speaking Spanish,
Mm.
celebrating Christmas, and we don't celebrate Christmas. Do you understand what I'm saying? So
Yeah. They were being miseducated.
exactly, exactly.
Receiving a miseducation. Right.
That's right.
Got you.
So
100%.
when it comes to having, I believe that the father is important to have in a home
Yes,
because
sir.
it instills the confidence
Yes,
in the
sir.
children.
Yes, sir. And
And
I have
that's
to say that I grew up with my father in the home. I think I
mhm.
said at the top of the broadcast, my parents have been married 45 years.
Wow. I'm
And I
trying to
can
get there.
admit, yes, and I can admit, and I thank my parents all the time now that that when they got married, they knew it wasn't about them, right? It was
Hmm.
about us. I'm the youngest of 3. But I can recall, and you can speak to this. I don't know how old you are, and you don't have to put your age out there if you don't want to.
I'm 41.
Okay, 41. Okay, I'm 38. My brother is 42, and then my sister is 45. But I
Okay.
can recall a time where, when you probably 4th grade, 6th grade, 8th grade, 9th grade, you want to be part of the in crowd,
That's
right?
right.
And your parents will see, like, why is he doing so? So my dad is like, hey, why are you doing that? Well, I want to be my dad say, no, you be your own man. You don't
That's
need to
right.
fit in with nobody. You be proud of who you are.
Hmm.
But and it hit different when you're getting this from your daddy than it
That's
does from
right.
your mother. I mean, it
That's
hits
right.
different because your dad is a man and he's telling you something that he's done himself.
Hmm. Even,
So yeah,
you have to forgive me. I'm outside, so you might hear the
you
cars
got it
drive
right,
by.
brother.
It's bedtime in my home, so I didn't want
Yes,
to
sir.
be in the house because it's kind of loud.
Yes, sir.
But I'm dealing with that very situation right now, to where one of my daughters is being called weird at school,
Mm,
and in my confidence and being an outcast, I have to give her the confidence.
hmm
So what we've done is, even within that, we started reading this poem called It's it. I am me, right? It's called My Declaration of Self-Esteem.
That's right.
And then we have her reading Our Deepest Fear. You
Mm,
know what I'm saying? So it's okay to be you. And that's the
absolutely.
thing that we talk to my daughter about. It's like, it's okay that these other people come with their other baggage. Because that's really what it is.
Right.
Hurt people. And it's even down to the children.
Absolutely.
Children hurt children because they are deficient or lacking in one area. So when they see a child that is smiling or happy, they're like, oh, they're weird.
Absolutely.
Do you
Right.
understand? So
Right.
it's like this whole stigma of, oh, they're weird, they're different. But no, it's that they have the confidence and they
That's
have like I believe that my daughter, for example, has the emotional intelligence
very important.
to be able to speak her feelings. So
Hmm.
when she sees something going wrong, she's able to voice her opinion.
Right. So
Hey,
now,
that's not right.
right. Let me ask you this. Seem to be very well put together, brother. Intelligent, articulate. Are your thoughts of people stating that the nuclear family is a Eurocentric idea?
I don't agree with that
Okay.
concept. Because where did the Europeans get it from? Let's talk about that. If you like to base things on fact, right?
I'm
So
gonna clap that
let's
up. I'm gonna clap that up. You're cooking right
so
now.
let's
You're cooking right
let's talk about the Moors.
now. Right.
The Moors
Come on, brother.
brought
Come on.
civilization, or they took us out of the dark ages, the Europeans out of the dark ages. They introduced them to um, perfumes, baths,
And
introduced them
it
to
gives me the opportunity to tell you that even when you are grieving, even when you are sad, when you're feeling down, when you're not.
I don't know what that was.
okay.
Go right ahead.
That the Moors, they sparked they took the Europeans out of the dark ages.
That's right.
Okay, introducing the concept of family,
Mm-hmm.
of the one unit, of the singular family. You understand? So I want to encourage other brothers and sisters to think about these concepts and think about how systematically through the welfare system, through academics,
Mm-hmm.
how through the industrial jail system complex, you know what I'm saying? Like how the war against black men,
Right.
like even for myself, like I live in the suburbs, right? I get up every morning, I'm out walking at 5 a.m. and I'm wearing a green vest with a blinking light on my shoulder, on my vest,
Mm-hmm.
and I'm still getting stopped by the police.
Mm. Right,
So
and you're wearing dress to where you can be seen, that you're not trying to be inconspicuous. Absolutely.
Exactly. Do you understand? And it still raises that question. And I live in the suburbs. I'm a light-skinned brother with long locks. But, is there a war against black men? Most definitely there is, because the thing is that people are rooted in fear.
Right.
And what they don't understand, they fear.
Mm-hmm.
So when we talk about black men, we are misunderstood. And a lot of times the picture that we see even on the television is that we are monsters, that we are heartless. So then when you come and you interact with us, how do you deal with a monster? You hard with a monster.
Right.
You don't have any sympathy or compassion because that's what you've been portrayed as.
Mm-hmm.
So
let me ask you this. This idea and concept of social fathering. Have you ever heard of that before?
I can Google it really quick, but I don't have any reference.
Social fathering is the idea and concept where the biological father doesn't raise the child, or care for the child, or nurture the child, or raise the child, but just men in the community do that.
Well, when I was coming up, I always heard the term, it takes a village to raise a child. Mm-hmm. So for example, if you didn't have the father, a lot of times that's where you had the uncle.
Right. Or the granddad.
Or the grandfather.
Absolutely. Or you had an older cousin who maybe had 12 years on you.
Exactly. But then I think
of, and I don't mean to cut you off, but when I think of this concept of social fathering now, What I think of is women meeting a guy and then 2 weeks moving them in their home, which happens a lot nowadays, unfortunately. And we do know that the 80% of the time when children have been victims of physical or sexual abuse, it comes from the individual, that the romantic partner, that the mother has moved into the home and given access to the children, right? And so this is a huge issue in our community where oftentimes, and we've seen this before, even though you're married, I know you've seen this before, to where oftentimes, unfortunately, and I'm not about to start sounding like Kevin Samuels, but we would see situations in our community where the women would have children, move to a certain area, doesn't want the father to know where she's at, so that she can engage in this type of behavior without there being any type of oversight.
I see.
No one calling and say, right, I can give an example, and I don't know where you're located, but I'm from Dayton, Ohio.
I'm from Dayton as well, but I live in Columbus. Okay, we live we got to link up sometimes, bro. I know you up here with me as well.
Absolutely. And so what ended up happening was, this was in West Dayton, in Westwood, where the father had a 2-year-old son with the young lady. He went down the motion for an immediate change of custody because she moved a man in the home that had been convicted of child abuse.
Wow.
So he filed the motion. This is in 2011. The magistrate says, no, we're not changing custody. There's no issue. 2 weeks later, his son was dead.
Yeah.
So these things happen a lot. And oftentimes it comes under the idea of social fathering, to where, because I'm almost, if you're honest, we live in a society, particularly in our culture, to where the motherhood is static, but
that's right,
are fluid, fathers are fungible, and fatherhood is fluid. So anyone can be your daddy whenever I want them to be your daddy.
That's right.
Right. And so as a result, it puts children in harm's way, and it teaches children what? I always argue that it also teaches it creates a lack of stability.
It does. It creates a lot of inconsistency.
Yeah.
And that's the thing that we're fighting against, is that inconsistency. Mm-hmm. And if we're talking about we're breaking generational curses, then we have to talk about we have to have these conversations. And that's the part, like within my Black family, within a lot of other Black families, there's these little secrets, these little dark secrets that nobody wants to talk about. You know, well, I had this traumatic experience, but then if we don't talk about it, we take that same baggage and we put it onto our children.
Absolutely.
And our children take that same baggage and they put it onto their children.
Absolutely.
So how do we take that trauma? That's the thing. Like, I'm doing a lot of work around social emotional learning.
Okay.
I do a lot of work around the emotional brain, understanding how your brain chemistry works when you are going through a traumatic situation. What do you have a fight or flight experience?
Right.
You understand? And that's the thing, is how even within being in my nuclear family, having a wife and 5 children, I can't protect them all the time. Right. So when issues arise, that's what we're doing. We're working to, when these issues happen, how do we handle that situation? Right. Like, we know there's going to be a situation, but once it comes about, how do we handle it? Absolutely. Do we have the foundation to even have that conversation?
Right. And, the thing is, a part of parenting, you have to prepare your children for the vicissitudes of life as an adult, right? So you manufacture adversity so that when they become an adult and they face adversity, it's like it's easy as Sunday morning. I always give an example. That's right. I used to box when I was younger, right? And I would be in training. I'm like, man, this training, man, you trying to kill me. And he would say, hey, what you think your opponent gonna do? Right? And so the training would be so hard and so rigorous and so you know what I mean?
That's right.
That the fight was easy. Like, you're like, damn, I ain't even tired. Yeah, that's because you in shape.
Right.
So that when you go on the job.
And the biggest thing, like what I learned from boxing, is how to take a punch.
Right. And not fall apart. Right. The world isn't over just because you got hit.
That's right. Right.
That's going to happen. So one thing I've been doing with my daughter, she's 12 now. Since she's been able to read, to comprehend, she's been learning about great Black women from antiquity till today, right?
Wow.
This is just on point. So she knows about Nefertiti and Queen Nzinga and Yah Santara and Queen Mother Moore and Mary Church Terrell and so on and so forth, right? Mary Cloud Bethune, the whole nine, right?
Wow.
And so, matter of fact, she's reading a book on Betty Shabazz now entitled Betty Before X. So it talks about the life of Betty Shabazz before she met Malcolm X.
Okay.
But long story short, I would have my daughter read these books, and I would tell her, well, when you become an adult, you know what you're gonna be told. You ain't nothing but a nigga bitch. You ain't never anything. You can't do anything because black women never been nothing. What you need to do is just find some chicken and lay on your back.
Mm.
And she was like 9 or 10. She said, "No, I don't believe that. I know better because I just read about some black women who da 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 da." And then she
That's
would
right.
tell me, the only opinion of me that matters anyway is my own. So I don't care what you think. So that's what I'm talking about. The being able to develop that emotional, as you said, the emotional intelligence, the emotional strength.
That's right.
To be able, when you go out into the world, this is what's going to take place, and it doesn't hit you like a ton of bricks. We can go back to what? The civil rights movement at the Highlander Folk School, right? They would prepare those brothers and sisters for what? Going into the jaws of the lion when they was doing those sit-ins, when they was doing those marches, when they were doing the freedom rides, right? Let me show you what you about to get and what you about to deal with. And if you can't handle it, this may not be the place for you. Doesn't mean you're a bad person. Doesn't mean that you're not committed to the struggle, but you just may not be what is best for this part. Right.
That's right. That's right.
One of the things that we do, we always talk about experience, we want to give our children what we didn't have. But I think oftentimes we forget to give them what we did have, and that is what agency, that is grit, that is the core, of course, self-determination.
That's
because
right.
I grew up in the hood in Dayton. I grew up in Dayton View, USA.
Same here.
That's what I'm talking about. You know what it is, DBH.
Yeah.
And whenever, we would go up against suburban schools, they might have a nicer field, better uniforms.
I'm going to cut my camera just for a second, but I'm still here, okay?
Okay.
I got to get my charger.
The uniforms, the whole nine. But our mindset was, what? We're going to beat their ass, right? So, that's the concept we had because we grew up and learned through actually how we were reared to, be practice and believe in, of course, having agency, grit, and, of course, self-determination, also known as Kuji Shakalia, the second principle of Kwanzaa. So I think it's important that we not only give our children what we did have, but also give them what we didn't have.
That's right. That's right. And that's what I do even with my daughters. It's like I'm constantly pushing them. So when we go out for walks, we're doing 3 and 4 miles. And sometimes my daughters, they cry because it hurts.
Mm-hmm.
And then, what my job is to do is, come on, I believe in you. Do you believe in yourself?
Absolutely.
Come on, push. Because, sometimes it's going to hurt, but you got to find it. And you got to push on through.
And that's one of the things I want to mention as well, because my son is 15, and I can recall when he was 5 years old, he was playing t-ball, and his first game he was horrible. He went like 0 for 5, didn't get a hit, and he was like, "I don't want to play baseball no more." And his mom was like, "It's okay, I understand." And I said, "Nah, you ain't quitting. We're gonna go to the park tomorrow, and we're gonna practice."
That's right.
So his next game, he went 3 for 3. He had 3 RBIs. I mean, he got his first hit. He ran to first base, and he put his thumb up at me, right? And after the game, he was like, "I like baseball now, and it's all because of my daddy," right? And so, some eye juice came because of my allergies or whatnot.
That's right.
But what ended up taking place was I told his mother, I said, if you let him quit this, he'll find a reason to quit something throughout life. Whenever there's a little adversity, whenever you fight some guy and the guy just throws one punch back, I can't do it. I give you an example of someone who lacked the emotional intelligence and who was not able to handle adversity in boxing. And I think you kind of follow boxing a little bit, right?
I do.
Zab Judah. Zab Judah would come out in every big fight fast. He was fast, guns blazing, ha! And then the minute you hit the guy back, that dude would fall apart.
Wow.
Ain't that what happened with Costa Zoo?
That's right.
Isn't that what happened with Baltimore? Isn't that what happened with Mayweather? Isn't that what happened when he fought Amir Khan? Isn't that what happened when he fought Cotto? Soon as they hit him back, he acted like he had never been in a boxing ring before. Am I telling the truth here?
Listen, man, a lot of it I think also boils down to your heart and how prepared you are.
Right.
You know,
True.
I would question if their heart was into it.
Well, see, so here's the issue, and I've hung out with a lot of New Yorkers, right? Because I love East Coast rap, but a lot of New Yorkers, they bloviate, they resort to histrionics, and they think that because they're from New York, they're the biggest and baddest mother flood puckers with cheese walking around.
That's
I put
right.
it down, right? However, I also was in the military and seeing cats in New York get dog walked.
Mm.
Thinking they were just gonna beat somebody because they were from NYC. It doesn't work that way. You and I
No,
know when you go into any situation, you have to be go in prepared for a dog fight.
that's right. That's right.
Mentally, you have. I remember when I used to box. So typically you spar what Monday, Wednesday, Friday at the gym, or some gyms on Tuesdays and Thursdays, right?
Hmm.
So you will be getting yourself prepared mentally days before you
That's
know you
right.
have to go in and spar. Right. And so one
That's
of the
right. Yeah.
go ahead, I'm sorry.
No, no, no. You're absolutely right. It's training that body, having putting yourself in that mindset to want to, because you're gonna get beat up.
Yeah,
Let's
yeah.
face it.
Yeah. I remember my first amateur fight, the next morning, my whole entire body was sore.
Wow.
And I remember telling my wife, like, hey, you gonna have to roll me out the bed.
Mm.
Yeah, like I was like, God, this is something new. Like I played football and never felt like that before. Like my whole body.
Wow.
Yeah. So they
Wow.
wonder
Wow.
why Floyd Mayweather was fighting one time a year. Like, you know what I'm saying?
I get it though.
Right.
Even with myself, um, I'm gonna take it back to what you were saying, uh, with the nuclear family and having the brain power, the emotional power as a father. What I had to realize, bro, is I got up to 376 pounds at one point
Woo.
because I was working and I wasn't putting the energy into myself.
Mm.
Do you understand? And in order to be a good father and a good provider, you have to carve out time for yourself.
Mm-hmm.
So what I do is for the last 55 weeks, I've been getting up every morning at 5 a.m. I'm out by 5:30, putting my feet to the pavement. Mm.
You frozen up on me. So hopefully we get you back on track. But once again, if you're watching, this is LumumbaSpeaks.com, Black Empowerment Initiative, where we believe we could gain a competitive advantage by always betting on Black. Make sure you hit the subscribe and the like button as well as the notification bell. We're having a conversation regarding is the concept of the nuclear family rooted in whiteness and Eurocentrism. Many people have argued, particularly feminists and the members of the radical left, that the concept of the nuclear family is a site of anti-Black violence and is antithetical to the idea and concept, of course, of Afrocentrism. So definitely, if you want to be part of the conversation, you could tap in. The link is in the chat. You do not, once again, you do not have to cam up if you don't want to. You don't have to cam up if you don't want to. But definitely, if you want to be part of the conversation, you could tap in. So let me ask you this. And I would agree with you when you talked about the concept of you got to take care of yourself because you're the general. And if you're not doing good, if you're not in good shape, how are we going to feel about ourselves? Many people would argue that the concept of the man being the head of the household, this idea of patriarchy is problematic, right? It's what do you say to that? Got to turn your mic on.
Here we go. Is that better?
Yes, sir.
I had too many windows open. My apologies. I had to switch my laptop.
It's all right.
Um, so basically, what I was saying is that for the last 55 weeks, I've been getting up every morning, putting my feet to the pavement, making my dreams come to a reality. But in finding this and doing this, I've become a better husband. I've become a better
Mm,
father. I've become a better friend. I've become a better person because I've given myself the power to do those things. And
mm-hmm.
that's getting up and walking every morning. Man,
Right.
I'm not the fastest dude. I'm running a mile in 12 minutes. But 9 months ago, I could barely walk. Do you
Right.
understand? Like my knee was so swollen, it was so bad. But now I'm doing 5 miles in an hour and 25 minutes. Do you
No.
understand? So it takes time. It's a process. And even having the intelligence that we have and the emotional intelligence and the confidence that you, even with your subscribers and listeners, they have to realize that it's levels to success.
Absolutely.
And it takes time to build up this type of confidence. Like when I wanted to be 21 years old and I wanted to, when I wanted to fit in with the crowd and go have a drink, I couldn't wait until I was 21. But
Mm.
it was a process. I had to take the time to be able to get to 21 and have those experiences. I couldn't rush it, even though I wanted to.
Right.
So
Right. So,
just being patient on yourself, being kind to yourself.
right. And so let me ask you this, take a pause for the calls real quick. Make sure, just want to let everyone know you're watching Lumumba Speaks, a Black Empowerment Initiative where we believe we could get a competitive advantage by always betting on Black. If you're watching, make sure you hit the subscribe and the like button. We're having a conversation where we're questioning this idea of the nuclear family being Eurocentric, being rooted in whiteness, and as a site, of course, of anti-Black violence and antithetical to the idea and concept, of course, of Afrocentrism. If you want to be part of the conversation, you can tap in. The link is in the chat. You don't have to cam up to be part of the conversation. You can keep your camera off and still voice your opinion. But here, just make sure we focus on facts over feelings. And the argument that you make, it can still be your opinion, that you undergo that with some factual information. So one of the things I want to ask you, Brother Alexander, is many people have argued, particularly feminists and members of the radical left, that the idea of a patriarchy, the man being the head of the household, is extremely problematic. What do you say to that?
Oh well, what I would say to that is that my situation is a lot different than most,
Mm-hmm.
because even though I'm highly educated, I'm a brother. I've got 2 master's degrees, but my wife is a doctor, so she's got more earning potential than I do. But then it goes back to what I told you before: is do we have someone else raising our children, or are we raising our children?
Mm-hmm.
And sometimes in life you have to take your sacrifice. Like
Mm-hmm.
all money ain't good money, and we have to realize that having a relationship is more valuable than all the money that you could make in the world. Having a
Right.
relationship with your children. So what I would say to those feminists, that my wife is a boss, okay, and that she and I have a partnership.
Mm-hmm.
But let's not get it twisted. With me or without me, she is still that woman. She is handling her business. She's always handled her business. She takes care of her responsibilities. And I'm not saying that she's the only woman that does that, because there are many women that handle responsibilities, and many women that are the breadwinners in their families. Do you understand? But but that's because of the social dynamics that we live in. Right now, women have more opportunities to be able to make those 6-figure salaries. Do you understand? Have those opportunities to work in these European offices, because as a black man, it's hard working in corporate America. I'm not sure if you've ever worked in corporate America before, but it's a lot of stress as
I
a
work in
in
higher ed.
say again.
I work in higher education.
Oh man, then you know for firsthand the stresses that come with fitting the part, being clean shaven, looking the part, having a certain dialect, speaking a certain way, behaving a certain way, because you don't want your counterparts to fear you or to misunderstand you. Do you understand?
Right. Right.
It,
And for many people that's an issue. I tend to follow the wisdom of one of our greatest ancestors, the father of Black nationalism, Martin Delany, who taught us many years ago, where he said, "I care not what white people think about what I say, write, or do." Right. And so for me, I say, hey, as long as I'm professional, I'm good. But I just have taken the position of not changing who I am in any way, shape, or form. So every job I've had, they know this dude is a Pan Africanist, right? They know that.
Mm-hmm.
We was having a conversation on the job. It's like something we could do, close the office on a Friday and do some like team building. They were like, "Hey, we could go hiking." I said, "I don't do that." I was letting you know, we could go bowling or something, but I ain't going hiking, right? So I think part of the issue, of course, is the standards that we have to have for ourselves and certain things that we're not willing to acquiesce in. But let me ask you this, because when you talked about the feminists, there are some I argue that when you're dealing with feminists, you're in the catch-22. You're damned if you do, you're damned if you don't. Because if you take a leadership position in your home, then what you're told is you're being patriarchal and controlling. But if you don't take a leadership position, you're a weak-ass man, and I, as the woman, has to carry the burden of the entire community on my back because you ain't no good. So you tend to be in a catch-22. You're damned if you do, you're damned if you don't. Right? What do you say to that?
So I like to go off history and facts, like you say, right? Let's talk about the systematic why our woman feels like she has to slay the dragon. Like she wants a man to pick up the sword and slay the dragon, but she's not going. She's like, okay, I'm just going to do it myself. I'm just going to kill the dragon. You're taking too long. Do you understand? And so, does she have that opinion of us, that Black man, that we're lazy? This is not by accident.
Right. And
it's not by accident.
And one of the things I've noticed is some women prefer to be with men like that so that they can wear the pants in a relationship. I've seen this. I mean, it's a reality.
But it's a very slippery slope.
Mm-hmm.
If it goes back to my grandfather when I was coming up, used to always say that communication is the chaos. So the better we communicate, the less chaos we will have. So even in those situations, are you communicating your needs? Are you talking about the things that you want? Even in my relationship, it's not always sunshine and rainbows, but we talk. Like my wife's my best friend, and one of the things that we pride ourselves on is not having any secrets.
Right. That's good. Really good. Brother Nate, appreciate you tapping in. Brother, how you doing today?
Hey, what's going on, Doc?
I'm doing all right. Once again, I'm not a doctor yet. Holler at me this time next year. And we're going to have a party online, all right? I'm going to be turning up, act like I got no, okay. I don't know if you know, but we're having a conversation about this idea and concept. I actually read an article, and I'm going to put the link to the article in the chat, where the author is opining, espousing the idea that the nuclear family structure was forced upon Black people and is decidedly Eurocentric and is a site of anti-Black violence. The author is also arguing that this concept of the nuclear family is antithetical to the idea of Afrocentrism or being African-centered. What do you say to that?
From my understanding and listening to to Dr. Amos Wilson, from what I'm understanding, African peoples have different family structures. From what I'm understanding, it's not just one dimensional. And I think that the nuclear family, from my understanding and research, is that it can only the nuclear family can only be supported on the behest of if the man himself can have full employment. So if the Black man is facing discriminatory practices on jobs and not able to have employment to his full potential, I think that can disrupt the nuclear family. Would you agree with that?
Well, so I appreciate you asking that question, and appreciate everyone who's tapped in and who's watching. Make sure you hit the subscribe and the like button and tapping in. The link is in the chat if you want to be part of the conversation. So I would say this. So historically, many scholars they see the root of the nuclear family due to the rise of the Industrial Revolution, right?
Right.
And so as a result, the father would go to work, mom would stay home with the children. However, in America, that was never the case for the Black community. In the Black community, Black men and Black women were always working, right? However,
Right.
what I will say is that throughout the Black history, we saw situations where there were nuclear family units and both parents were working. Sometimes the woman made more money than the man, but it still was a nuclear family unit. The other issue, and I did like that you stated that there were several forms of family units in African history, but there were nuclear families in Africa prior to European incursion on the continent.
Right.
When you look at ancient Kemet, Ethiopia, and of course the great Western Sudanic empires of Songhai, Mali, and of course Ghana, right? And we do know that when we talk about the Moors, that political entity known as the Moors, this is one of the things that they contributed to setting up, according to many, in Southern Europe. So it's not typically based on that the man has to be making all the money, but it's based on the idea and concept that there are two parents in the home, and they are primarily responsible for the rearing, development, nurturing, and financial support of their children.
Right. So basically, it's the nuclear family. I mean, to understand it correctly, is it can only be supported fully under basically the two party ability to acquire resources, right?
Ideally, yes. Ideally, but that typically has never happened. But ideally, that's the belief.
So if we're having issues with uh, high unemployment within the Black community, how then can that be achieved?
Well, but we've always found a way to do it. It's called adaptive vitality, right? So
Well,
I would give an example of at a very early age, in my household, in my family, my dad got laid off of work, and then he went back to work and had an injury, ended up getting workman's comp. There was a time where we were on food stamps, but we still had a sound family structure.
gotcha. But like, I guess I'm trying to understand, like, with the feminists, if that okay. So you're saying the feminists are saying that if the man is not able to have adequate
No,
money or
no, no.
resources,
What I'm saying about the feminists is that with the feminists, you tend, as a man, you tend to be damned if you do, damned if you don't. If you
gotcha.
are providing, if you are leading, if you are creating a structure and imposing values and implementing values in a worldview and the idea and concept of who we are as a family unit, then that's seen as patriarchal. And we know patriarchal is ooh, that's the scary word, right? For feminists, right? But on the
Gotcha.
other hand, if you're not doing those things, then you're bleep, 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 weak ass man. You ain't no good, and I have to do everything on my own anyway because ain't no real man out here in the first place.
Now, when I listened to Dr. Amos Wilson, he did mention he's. It seems like he kind of advocate for patriarchy, and the only reason
Absolutely.
is because uh, the opposing groups tend to be patriarchal,
Well, and here's
and
the other thing, right? Most Pan African nationalists are patriarchal. The other thing is African culture traditionally has been patriarchal. If you ever read the military, we're talking about the revolutionary historian Walter Rodney, his book How Europe Underdeveloped Africa, right? He talks about this, that African culture traditionally is patriarchal. This is something that even the European colonizers mentioned, that they were surprised that they had in common with us, was that our cultures were patriarchal. So yes, I would agree with you. The enemy that we're going up against, their cultures are patriarchal. But the other issue is we've seen what a matriarchal Black community looks like. And to be honest with you, if it was a boxing match, they would have called that shit before the first round was over. Because what we do
wow,
know is that children that grow up without their fathers in the home, and I'm not talking about mom's boo thing or mom's boyfriend, but without their biological father, are 80% more likely to drop out of school. They're 80% more likely to have what? Disciplinary issues. They're 80% more likely to do drugs. They're 80% more likely to get involved in doing crime. And they're also 80% more likely, then once again, the number 80, to what? Become sexually lascivious. So we
gotcha.
know by the numbers, when you look at the center for child abuse, right, that not having the father in the home does a child a disservice. right? It doesn't benefit the child. It actually harms the child not to have the child there. Children are
Right.
actually 80% more likely to be victims of physical or sexual abuse when the father isn't in the home. Why? Because pedophiles, they see that as an opportunity. Pedophiles don't come around when daddy there because they know they're going to probably get their ass killed.
Got you.
This is the
Got you.
reality. If you see me walking around, you already know what it is. Like, you want my daughter, you want my son, all right, I'm going to clap your ass like Birdman and Clips. Seriously, what happened to that boy? He tried to touch my daughter, so I put a clapping to that boy. This is just a reality. Hey. You know what I mean? I mean, this is real. So, however, what we're finding is by pushing away from these concepts of male protection, and we know a great ancestor, we're talking about Dr. Golly, I'm missing her name. She was from DC. She wrote the ISIS papers, Frances Cress Welsing. She talked about these issues. Peace, sister. Appreciate you. Tap in, be part of the conversation. We'd love to get a sister's opinion, a sister's perspective. What we tend to find is that she stated is if you want to destroy a race of people, right, what do? You destroy the men because they're the protectors. They're the first line of defense, not just physically, but also ideologically. Right now, I'm not a person who believes in the Bible. I'm an atheist. I've mentioned this on my channel several times. But if you want to look at the stories of the people in the Bible, the children of Israel, when they were being their conquerors did what? They would say, take out the men.
Yeah, this that have been a theme throughout history. Anytime
that's a theme throughout history. You get rid of the men.
Yeah.
Because women and children, unfortunately, are more likely to acquiesce to what? Foreign domination.
That's right. Now I've heard some people don't believe that men are necessarily, or well, for us black men, they're not necessarily oppressed. They treat oppression as is kind of flat, like it's just being black. Period.
So this is what I say to that, right? So I think it's twofold. One, and that's what I tell people is because many people argue black women, they have to deal with intersectionality, they have to deal with gender forms of racism, and being a woman and being black, right? What I tell people is that when you're dealing with anti-black racism, black men and black women deal with gender forms of racism. So black women may be sexualized in the workplace, right? But black men are fetishized in the workplace. I've been in the workplace and had a woman sexually harass me. I've been in the workplace with a woman, ooh, can you just flex for me?
Wow.
So I've had these things happen. I've been at the gym before and had a white woman touch my muscle and say, "Bit, don't you get your ass," you know what I'm saying? Goddamn mud shark, don't touch me. Right? So these things just actually happen, right? So what we do, we both deal with gender forms of racism, but they're just on different ends of the plane. So, for example, there's been studies to show, but particularly by Dr. T. Hassan Johnson, that what black men, one of the forms of gender forms of racism black men face is that we face high levels of employment and discrimination because there's a belief that we would act violently on the job, meaning black men are inherently criminal. However, black women on the other end, they face a form of gender racism to where they're more likely to be hit on and sexually harassed in the workplace. Right. Yeah. So we're being denied a job because of our black masculinity, and they're being sexually harassed in the workplace because of their black femininity. Right. So we're both dealing with forms of gender racism, but it's all under the umbrella of anti-black racism.
Right. Well, I think maybe the difference is where people are not seeing a commonality, it seems to be.
Yes, sir. Yes, sir.
Yeah, because they're seeing that, like you mentioned, black males are highly basically they're stopped at the door from even getting into the corporation, as opposed to when they let the black woman in, she is employed. So that's also the arguments I hear is the low employment among black men and a much higher employment among black women is where I hear a lot of the debate coming from.
Yes, sir.
But that makes sense what you said, though.
Yeah, so when we both deal with gender forms of racism, but if you talk to an intersectionalist or feminist, they're like, nah, I don't know what you're talking about. It's only a one-way street, right? So that's being, once again, I always state, that talk about being intellectually disingenuous. That's a person who's intellectually disingenuous, right? But it's an issue. But I think oftentimes what we have to do is we have to use our kumba, creativity, right, to find a way to navigate around that. And I always tell brothers, don't be like OJ when he was hosting Monday Night Football and take the bass out your voice, right? Don't do that, right? Simply accomplish, have your credentials together, and be on your shit. That's really what it comes down to, right? So I used to have locks like Bud Alexander. I cut mine. That's a long story. We can have that conversation offline, right? But as you can see, I have a full beard, right? So when I go into the job interview, I'm looking like goddamn GQ Man of the Year. Right? They look at when I come in, they're like, who the fuck is that? You know what I'm saying? But then I come in and matter of fact, I give an example of the first job I had actually interviewed for when after I graduated, I finished my undergrad. I interviewed for a position at Wilberforce University as an academic enrichment coordinator. And I was the only person who interviewed for the job that didn't have a graduate degree at the time. And so I was sort of working on my presentation about 3 weeks out. Because, you apply for a job in higher ed, you have to give a presentation.
That's right.
You do an interview, you got to do what they call a job talk. So I go in there, I got my flash drive, and I got my suit on, and and they was like, "Oh, we're sorry, our computer isn't working." I did the whole presentation from memory.
Wow.
Right. So part of it is you show up. You got to, I don't know if you all are familiar with Barry Bonds, right? But that year, Barry Bonds hit 73 home runs. That year, he probably would only see 2 pitches the entire game. He'd knock both of them out the park. And so what I always tell brothers is we got to kind of be on that Barry Bonds, right? To where whenever we get that opportunity, we knock it out the park.
So do you think, like you just mentioned that they was having problems with their computer, and I guess, do you feel as though, and I'm not saying that to have a victim mentality, because people like to say, oh, you have a victim mentality, but what I'm about to say is that, do you think possibly you may have been sabotaged? Because I hear brothers, go through these different interviews and it's all of a sudden certain things start going wrong. Not that they can't, but just it just somehow it just seems, like any other time these things wouldn't happen.
I'm gonna answer your question, but I want to show this video that I just mentioned. Then I'm gonna answer your question. So,
all right.
But even under this pressure, right? A black man has to keep his composure all the time.
All the time. So let me play this video real quick. And I'm talking about having the Barry Bonds effect, right? Having the Barry Bonds. So, I showed that to say that's the Barry Bonds mindset, right? Doesn't matter. You get 1 or 2 cracks at it, you knock it out the park, right? So let me say this to you to answer your question about this concept and idea of us being victims, right? Have we been victimized in America? Absolutely. Have we been victimized in the Western world? Absolutely. Have we been victimized on the African continent? Absolutely, right? But here's the reality. Even though we dealt with, as African Americans, 244 years of chattel enslavement, right? Even though we've dealt with the betrayal of the Negro during Reconstruction, known as the First Nadir, and over 100 years of second-class citizenship, and this idea and the concept of social control known as Black codes and Jim Crowism, we can't allow ourselves to see ourselves as the victim. Because when you allow yourself to see yourself as the victim, you start looking for someone else to do something for you, and you doing something for yourself. And that is the agents, that is the enemy, the antithesis, of course, of that Black radical tradition of audacious self-assertion, right? Now, what I will say is, irrespective if they were trying to set me up or not, I was so locked in. Like Barry Bonds was at that plate at Yankees, I was so locked in, it didn't even matter, right? I was so locked in and so ready to get that presentation, so ready to do my job talk. It didn't matter if they were trying to sabotage me. It didn't matter if the computer was actually working and the projector was on point. I was so locked in, I did it from memory on a dry erase board.
And I think you said it. I think you said some very important things as well, that you prepared for the interview. You did it 3 weeks out. So it's kind of like this, when preparation meets opportunity.
Yes, sir. Yes, sir.
So, and you preparing, then you had an opportunity, and you succeeded.
Absolutely. And that's the mindset that we have to have, right?
That's right.
And I'm like a big motivational guy. So like when I work out all the time, I work out like 5-6 days a week, right? And I'm always like, when I get up in the morning, I'm playing some motivational, like Rocky theme song music in the shower because I got to go this day on the job, right?
Right.
Sometimes before I write the paper, I play some like a promo to a Floyd Mayweather fight before I start writing the paper. Like, that's just how I am. I got to lock in, get myself in the mindset to put this work in, right? Mm-hmm. And the other thing is we've all played sports, right? Tell me a sport that you participate in where your opponent is not trying to sabotage your success.
That's true. Yeah.
Come on,
I mean, that's
man.
the whole point.
Right? That's the whole point. Yeah. So we got to
Mm-hmm.
take that same mindset out into the world. Because when we're on the basketball court, when we're playing football, when we're boxing, when we're playing chess, we're about to beat them up no matter what it is.
That's right.
Right? That we need to have that same mindset and that same energy, because I believe in being consistent out there in the world, competing and being competitively successful, where it really matters.
What do you, if you don't mind me asking, what are you going to be a doctor in?
Yes, I'm getting my PhD in higher education student affairs with a specification in African-American perspectives. My forthcoming dissertation is entitled I'm sorry, let me get this right. On intersectional ground, examining the efficacy of Black cultural centers in the era of intersectionality. And so what I'm looking at, my study is looking at how can Black cultural centers remain a site of Black solidarity and Black social bonding at historically white institutions during an era in which many Black students do not view being Black as their most salient identity.
Ooh.
Wow.
Yes,
power. Sir. That's powerful, bro. And I say that, and I say that on so many fronts because as a young man, that's what got me through college. I went to Wright State, and if it wasn't for the,
I know what you're talking about. Yeah.
If it wasn't for the Belinga Center and having those connections, I probably wouldn't have graduated. Let's face it.
Yeah.
You understand? And having that community, having people that I could talk to, exactly, having mentors, you understand? So you are exactly right. And that was one of the things that we were facing even when I graduated in 2007 was people not having the concept of the idea of what the Black Cultural Center stood for, what it represented, the history behind it. You know, a lot of, I hate to say it, a lot of my brothers and counterparts, they were so infatuated with this Greek idea.
Right. Come on, preach, brother, preach.
that they didn't have any concept of self.
Mm-hmm.
Do you understand? And that's a powerful thing, is that you were trying to pretend or get into this organization, this Greek mindset, not knowing that you got all the answers.
Right.
And then
that was a big thing for me too, brother. So I'm like, man, I ain't about to be on no Greek shit. Like, I know I'm African, right?
That's right.
I couldn't reconcile the two, right? And the other issue, and then you probably would can speak to this as well, was you would see those brothers engaging in behavior that what we would consider to be unbecoming.
That's right.
Right. I mean, there's a party on campus, and you're getting in fights with other Black men just because they're part of another sorority. I mean, fraternity.
That's right. You said it right.
Yeah, but I want to be part of something like that. Like, I grew up in the hood. I grew up in the hood. I knew what it was like to, hey, you go to the park and you can get your Pumas to come home barefoot wilding.
That's right. That's right.
You get in a fight once every 2 weeks to keep your coat. With cats is talking about, hey, you run your coat black. Literally. But cats were getting pimped for their starters jackets.
That's right.
My brother had a starter's jacket. My dad took that motherfucker and threw it away without my brother knowing, because he was so afraid he was going to get killed for it.
Wow.
So,
wow.
And now they're selling starter in Walmart.
Yeah, so like, why would I come from that and then go here? You all are trying to play like y'all thugs and gangsters. Thugs don't go to college. Gangsters don't go to college.
Not at all. Not at all. And that's a lot of what separates me as well. You know, being from Dayton View, being from Five Oaks, and a lot of that stuff was kind of corny to me. I never needed to pay for friends to fit in, or I never wanted to take an oath. Even now, I be telling my children, we don't take no oaths. We're not giving no pledges. You
Mhm.
know,
And that's the other thing. I'm like, well, and like I said, growing up in day, if you be like, for me to trust you and believe you're a brother, I have to know you for years.
that's
Like
right.
how we was, like, I gotta grow up with you to see what you really about. I can't just
Mhm.
Right.
something with you for a couple of weeks and now you my brother. So
That's
that,
right.
I never reconcile that. So I never took part in it. But I just put in the chat the name of my forthcoming dissertation on intersectional ground, examining the efficacy of Black culture centers in the era of intersectionality. In fact, I'm going to make sure I do a video next week on this idea of Black culture centers, examining the efficacy. I would just let you know from some of the preliminary writing that I've done and research is that I entitled it on intersectional ground because back in the 90s, there was a movement to replace Black cultural centers. And Brother Alexander, you may be aware of this, with what multicultural centers.
That's right.
Led Dr. C. I knew you was going to
That's
know.
right. That's
So,
right.
Dr. Lloyd Patton Davis, who's doing some great work as the actual chair of the Department of Higher Ed Student Affairs in the College of Education and Human Ecology at The Ohio State University. She did her dissertation on Black cultural centers, but she wrote a paper. Her dissertation was on. It was entitled on solid ground, because a white guy had wrote a paper questioning if Black cultural centers were on shaky ground. And what she argued was that Black cultural centers were invaluable to the Black cultural experience at a historically white institution, and that
That's
they
right.
could be replaced by multicultural centers because they actually address something that multicultural centers don't. That is anti-Black racism. Right.
That's
And so
right.
some other issues as well about how Black culture centers are oases of Blackness in a desert of whiteness. We know that historically white institutions are white culture centers.
That's right.
By definition, right, or by default. So I'm arguing. So I'm furthering that from on shaky ground to on solid ground to what now on intersectional ground. And one of the very audacious claims that I've made is that Black cultural centers need to take a page out of Jewish cultural centers throughout America, right? Jewish cultural centers at historically white institutions are not on campus, but they are adjacent to campus. Oftentimes, they're directly across the street from campus, right? And what they, as a result, they're independently funded.
But then let's talk about that, though.
Programming, right? And but people don't know, these Hillel centers, these Jewish Hillel cultural centers, at what public institutions were created due to the lack of Jewish cultural attention and ethnic pride, and the fact that many Jewish students 100 years ago were marrying non-Jewish people. So the Jewish community said,
so let's talk about that, right?
Yes, sir.
First off, what is the nationality of Black Americans? Do Black Americans have a nationality?
Well, we have an ethnicity, but nationality is
a nationality, not an ethnicity, but a nationality. Because when we talk about coming together and pulling our money together, that's the difference between when you speak about these Jewish institutions, is that they have actually declared their nationality. So even though they're an ethnic group that's been through the Holocaust, they've been afforded privileges and other rights than what we have been privileged to or privy to.
Right.
So you're basically saying declaring themselves as an actual nation, right?
Right. And a nation of people, and that's just something that Marcus Garvey promoted with the concept of course, his concept of Pan-Africanism and the creation of the Pan-African flag, that we were a nation of people, if not necessarily a nation state, but a nation of people.
Right.
I don't think they have been declared. I mean, at least to my understanding, I don't think they have been declared among us. If it have, maybe I missed it.
So you're saying that you don't know if the Jews have been declared as a nationality?
Well, no, I'm talking about Black people in this country.
Oh, no, we've never been declared a nationality.
That's it. I don't think, but I've never seen it.
No, sir. We've never been declared a nationality. And then that's the problem with us having the funding and the opportunities, because a lot of it comes down to, like, even I do a lot of work with the state, and we don't have a lot of representation. So if you don't systematically, if you don't,
if I could real quick, phony representation, but real representation, no.
Right. When I talk about representation, I mean creating laws and changing laws and creating new ones. I'm talking about actual policy.
Yes.
Right.
That's where we don't have a lot of representation.
What that would be the lack of work that's done by the Congressional Black Caucus. I mean, they are an absolute joke.
Right. And then that's why I would even argue with you about why, like, even for example, when I graduated from Wright State, I had the opportunity to work at Antioch College at the Coretta Scott King Center.
Oh yeah, I remember. Yes, Dr. Dana Patterson was there. Yeah.
So when I was under Dr. Patterson.
Okay.
When she was there. So she was one of my mentors, one of my colleagues, and that's how I know you, Bakari, from Antioch. You got your memory. You don't remember me, but we've been knowing each other for many moons. We got a lot of the same associates, bro. But Dr. Patterson, that's a lot of the same work that we did. And at one point, they were trying to make that a multicultural center, and it was like, no, this is a Black cultural center. This is the Coretta Scott King Center.
Coretta Scott King went to Antioch University, Midwest. Yeah. Right.
And for all those who don't know who Coretta Scott King is, that is the wife of Martin Luther King Jr.
Yes, Reverend Doctor. You know, you can't mention Reverend Dr. Martin Luther King Jr. without mentioning Coretta Scott King. You can't mention one without the other. We got to put some respect on that Queen Mother's name.
That's facts. That's facts. And also, she's having an event. Antioch College, the Coretta Scott King Center is having an event September the 10th as well. They're going to have a poetry reading and some other things. They're trying to do some good work over there at Antioch with changing people's ideas, the ideas.
And that's really what it comes down to. You know, I can recall when I was under the mentorship of Dr. Boyker S. Tway when he was, the head of the.
Oh, Dr. Tway.
Yeah, you know, you
I know Dr. Tway.
And so one of the big things he always teach us is that one of the biggest crises that we have in Black America and the African American community is we have a value and views crisis. And I'm like, well, what do you mean? What are you talking about? He said, well, sit down and shut up, and I'll tell you. Right? He didn't tell me shut up. He told me sit down. Right? And what he stated was that many of our people, not all, but many of our people have an unhealthy and inaccurate view of what it means to be Black or African. And as a result, that leads to us engaging in racially disempowering, self-defeating, and self-destructive behaviors. And I would give you all an example. We know that, unfortunately, many of us grow up in situations due to a systemic and institutional and structural racism where we grow up in situations where we're economically deprived. Right. However, for many of our young brothers, unfortunately, what is the solution to economic deprivation? I got to go hit this lick. I got to commit a crime. Right. And then as a result, next thing you know, they're part of the carceral state. Right. And they're working for free. So there's an issue there in terms of their values and how they view themselves in society, that the solution to any economic problem is to become a criminal, is to become a miscreant. When the reality,
so you're saying, I'm sorry, I want you to finish your point.
Is that the majority of Black men who grow up in economically depressed and destitute situations don't turn to criminality to make a living. So these are some issues that we have to address. Just like, I've met some women, of course, I'm 38 years old, who they're like, hey, well, if I ain't got no job, I'm gonna just start walking, I'm gonna be a street walker. I'm just sell this box. I'm like, damn, like what? Like
I look at it as a level of desperation. Okay. We both from the same area, so we know what it is, man. Okay. When we talk about having a lack of opportunity, having resources, a lot of times, even for in my own personal life, I've always been different. You understand? So I've always thought differently. But when you are in survival mode, you'll do anything to survive. And also, it's kind of like when you're fearful, it's that flight or fight response. Yes, so if you worry about how you gonna eat, you gonna hit that lick.
Well, and I'm gonna say this. I'm gonna say this because I can say this because it was about 20 years ago. But when I was 19, I actually had got with some brothers and we had devised a plan to rob a restaurant. And I remember we had went out, bought zip ties, gloves, ski masks, and I remember I was at my grandparents' house probably about 2 hours before we were going to do it. And some guy tried to rob the same store the same day, but 2 hours earlier, and they had him on the news. And why did you do it, sir? Why did you do it? And the guy was like, just hard times. I remember my grandfather was like, he gonna really have some hard times now. And I remember thinking to myself, like, what the fuck? You see what I'm saying?
That's right.
Part of it was desperation, but part of it was not understanding that there are options out there.
Right. But it's like I said, but once again, if you don't know better, how do you do better? Well, that's the thing. So let's take it into my life, right? My older brother's a felon.
And that's what this comes back to what? The start of the conversation. We talking about the family unit. The African proverb states what? The ruin of a nation begins in the homes of its people.
Mm-hmm.
That's what it doesn't say the community center. It doesn't say the community, the village. It doesn't say the church, the mosque, the synagogue, the school building, right? It says the ruin of a nation begins in the homes of its people.
Right. So then that's why the nuclear family is so important.
So important.
That's why fathers are so important in the home. That's why having a mother and my older brother's a felon. My father was on crack cocaine. Do you understand what I'm saying to you? My younger brother's a felon. Out of 5 brothers, I'm the only one that don't have a number. And I'm not saying that to brag, because I'm no different than them. I just made different choices, because after a while, it's kind of like either you do the same thing and you get the same outcome, or you do something different. You take a chance. And that's the only thing that I did, is I just took a chance. I bet it on black. Like you said, I wasn't betting on green no more. I'm betting on black, bro.
Absolutely. Appreciate the brother and sister in the chat. Make sure you hit the subscribe and the like button, as well as the notification bell. Please join the conversation. Feel free. I'm going to once again put the link in the chat. Join the conversation. We're talking about this concept of course, the nuclear family being rooted in whiteness is antithetical to, of course, African being African-centered. And is, of course, this idea and concept of the nuclear family a site of anti-Black violence. So please be part of the conversation. You don't have to cam up, but you can still give your perspective and opinion. So right now, with Brother Alexander is talking about how he chose to bet on black rather than bet on green. And then, of course, you were speaking about how somehow, some way, you decided to make a decision to not follow in the footsteps of those in your family who unfortunately decided to live a life of crime.
Right. And that's powerful to step out on an idea that you could be different. And also, but it's very scary. And what I see is a lot of times people are in a box and they don't see any way out of that box. Right. So how do you create an opening in your box? How do you create a hole in the box? Do you understand? And that's all I did I'm only a reflection of the people that were around me. Yeah. So I'm a good learner. I'm able to learn from my older brother. Do you understand? Oh man, he got caught up doing this. Maybe I need to be moving this way. Right. Or you know what I'm saying? Like, oh, you too flashy, big bro. You need to chill out. Like you got, instead of wearing 2 gold chains, maybe wear 1, or don't wear all the rings. You know what I'm saying? Like, but that's a lot of times in the mentality of hustling, it's like I have to look a certain way. It's like I have to live up to a certain standard, but that standard is a lie. Wow. There's no such thing as perfection. Like my boy Les Brown says, there's no practice makes better. There's no such thing as perfection.
Now, Les Brown, that name sounds familiar.
You hip to Les Brown, the motivational speaker, brother from Cleveland, Ohio?
I got to see his face.
Black man, older black man. Okay. He speaks with like Tony Robbins. He's one of Eric Thomas, Eric the hip hop preacher Thomas, one of his mentors. Yeah.
Okay. And the sister Miranda as well says she's mixed race. She's a white a white mother, a black Jamaican father. Well, from a Pan-Africanist perspective, we don't blame the child for how they got here, right? Some of the fathers and mothers, of course, of Pan-Africanism were mixed racial ancestry, right? You talk about a T. Thomas Fortune, right? You talk about one W.B. Du Bois, right? You talk about a even in Jamaica, Bob Marley.
Bob
right?
Marley, right?
So we don't blame the person for how they got here, right? But what we do are concerned with is if you're black-minded, right? Because we got some people who are blue, black, purple who will sell you down the river. Then we have some brothers and sisters who, of course, were of mixed racial ancestry, were blacker than a blueberry tree, right? So it all comes down to if you are black-minded. And many people ask me, what does that mean, right? Black-minded is someone who that is almost the concept of known as a race man or a woman, right? You've dedicated your life to the upliftment of African people at home and abroad to help restore our people to our traditional greatness.
I want to ask a question, but go ahead, bro. Well, the question I want to ask is that, and what we're talking about, the black family, and I know some of you guys mentioned that, we got to make better choices, and I 100% agree with that. But overall, do you think the greatest issue that's causing black family disruption would be oppression?
I want to say this: there's some sisters in the chat. Please don't be shy. Tap into the conversation. We would love to hear you all's perspectives. Sister Carrie, I heard what you said about the husband is able to just give your son a look and he straightens up. I was that way with my father as well. But you, on the other hand, sometimes you have to talk to him more than once. But please tap in. You don't have to cam up. But definitely love to get your perspective regarding the conversation we're having. Yes, it's very important to have both parents in the home. Right back at you, Brother Nate. You were talking about the question of, is the black family being oppressed more so? Is the destruction of the black family due to oppression, or maybe to our own racially disempowering behavior? Am I putting that correctly?
Yeah, that's what I'm asking.
What do you think, Brother Alexander?
Oppression. Man, I think it goes back to what you guys were saying even earlier, having a victim versus a victor mentality.
Come on now.
I'm done blaming people on the misfortunes. Like, we know the problem. In my life, I like to focus on solutions. I have an engineering brain, so a lot of it is I see a problem and what are the solutions? How do we fight against that? And the biggest thing that I can take from all of this is it starts with a self accountability, right? There's no rule book on how to do this, and nobody can. You can't give anybody that power to oppress you. Do you understand? Like, when we talk about oppression, like, true, there are injustices that happen, but I'm not into giving people more power than they deserve. And when we talk about oppression, I feel that word gives people more power than what they deserve. So if we are trying to stand on what it is to be a black man, what it is to be a father, it takes a lot of it starts with self. You got to look yourself in the mirror, and then it always goes back, for me, it goes to black man's mental health. Are we taking care of ourselves mentally? Are we having the conversation? That's why therapy is so important. So you can stop, you can own these issues. Like, we, as a black man in America, 9 times out of 10, you got PTSD, bro. But are you dealing with that?
So how do you think they get the PTSD from the get-go?
How do you think you get PTSD? Listen, man.
Let me answer that question real quick. There's a concept, and I'm gonna put it in the chat, known as racial battle fatigue. Right, and so that's the type of PTSD that black people tend to suffer from, and I'm gonna give you the direct definition rather than me giving you a definition.
That's hard. The factual definition.
Yeah. So racial battle fatigue was a term coined in 2008 by critical race theorist William Smith It was originally used in reference to the experiences of African American men. Look, you're dealing with some facts, but Alexander, in America, but it's now expanded to describe the negative and racially charged experiences of all Black people in the United States. So basically, racial battle fatigue is a concept of you've been dealing with anti-Black racism since you've been born. You're dealing with physical assaults, psychological assaults. You've been dealing with microaggressions, structural racism, institutional racism, interpersonal racism. And as a result, at some point, you get fatigued from it.
Mm-hmm.
Right? So that is what racial battle fatigue is.
So if that's go ahead. I'm sorry, brother. Go ahead.
So you have to even in realizing this oppression and this PTSD is how do what do we do in our communities? We drinking, we smoking, we doing drugs, we doing everything else but dealing with the issue, dealing with the problem.
Right. And the Sister Carrie is stating that unfortunately therapy is often considered taboo in our community, regardless if you are African American, Afro-Caribbean, African, etc. That's because we've been taught that if you have any problems, you got to lay it at the feet of Jesus.
This white God, this white savior.
Right. We know that's a huge problem. I'm a huge advocate of therapy. I've gone to therapy before. I know that if it wasn't for therapy, I'm telling you, I'll be doing 20 to life. Literally, I would have bodied somebody if it wasn't for going to therapy, right? And so I think it's very important that we advocate therapy. I think I'm doing a show on Sunday on if did Kevin Samuels help or hurt the Black community with his commentary and perspectives. And one of the things that I am going to mention is that he was a huge advocate for therapy. Many people would say, well, I went through a church-based therapy. That's not therapy. Anything that's not therapy. You need to actually see a licensed therapist who went to school for this shit. Right? I'm gonna say shit.
That's right.
I can say it's my platform, right? So, and actually, that's their profession. But one of the things that we don't do, and one of the things we do in our community that I truly dislike is we would get an opinion from someone about a subject matter that they are not a knowledge or professional expert on. So we get an opinion on should I get a COVID vaccine for someone who isn't even a medical professional.
That's right.
Right, we're getting an opinion on an STD on someone who.
How about this? We'll get an opinion from the pastor about our marriage, and he's not even a licensed therapist, marriage counselor. Exactly.
Absolutely ridiculous. So, I am a huge advocate of therapy, but what I also tell people, particularly even with children, right? The first therapist. Now, I had a conversation. I said the first therapist a child should be their parents. They should always be able to go to their mom or dad and say, hey, I need to talk to you about XYZ. My kids are like that. My son would always say, you have to talk to me because you made me. He would say that. He would literally say, you have to talk to me because you made me. I'm like, son, I know. I should tell you this when you was a toddler. I know I have to talk to you. What's going on? What do you want to talk about? Right? And he literally, to this day, hey, anything wrong? What's going on? And what I do, because most parents say, you can tell me anything. And then you spaz out. I actually don't. Because I expect these type of things to happen. So when they tell me, like, oh, you're not mad? I said, no, this is called life. As my grandmother would always tell me, if you think this is something, you ain't seen nothing yet.
That's right. And you know, it's funny that you say that because I ask my children every day, so what was the hardest part of your day today? What was the most challenging thing you had to do in school today? I want to know because I think that's important. And like you said, it opens the lines of communication.
Come on now.
You know, when I was coming up, my mom, she did the best that she could. But one of the things that I always remember is I'm not your friend.
Right.
And one of the things that I put into practice with my children is I want them to know that they my best friend and that I'm their best friend and that we can talk about anything.
That's good.
And I would say I'm a little different. I tell my kids we can talk about anything, but I'm like, we ain't never gonna be friends. Like,
well, but that's right. But I got 5 of them though, so I got to manage all their emotions, my man. You know what I'm saying? Like, I got to be their friend because we a team, and I can't do it. Like I tell them, I can't do this all by myself. Right. So I need you to help me.
That you're doing that too, yeah. And part of it, me being the baby in the family, my older brother and sister kind of took on that concept of, okay, we're going to be extensions of mom and dad. But I would just run around, got to do whatever I want to a certain extent. But I want to answer Brother Nate's question because I don't want to be dismissive. where you ask the question, is the breakdown of Black family unit due to contemporary oppression or Black dysfunction? I believe that it is due to a combination of both, right? I think historically we can argue that we know the breakdown of Black family started during chattel enslavement, right? We can argue that also during the first nadir, there was a situation where the Black family was broken up, right? Then we also know there was a process during, of course, the so-called Great Society initiatives by Lyndon Baines Johnson that required, in order to receive any type of government aid, the father couldn't be in the home.
That's right.
Unfortunately, that due to that taking place, even though there was a great movie done on that actual situation known as Claudine, that came out in 1974, starring the vivacious Diane Carroll, right? I'm always gonna have love for Diane Carroll, right? But as a result, I watched that movie like 10 times as a kid, boy, just because of her. My brother, you ain't like this movie, don't you? Uh-huh. Yeah, it's good. Like now I'm watching Diane Carroll. Like, boy, you better ask somebody. But let's stay focused, right? So of course what ended up taking place was in a matter of 20 years, one generation, there was a normalization of fathers not being in the home. There was a documentary, a documentary on the vanishing Black family, where they were actually interviewing Black mothers, and they were stating, hey, I made it to be 18 to 20 without a father, so my kid doesn't need a dad either. So normalization, and now it's become a self-fulfilling prophecy. So I would always tell my children, we have to be extremely intentional with what we do and how we do it. Extremely intentional, because nowadays this isn't just in the Black community, and the American culture in general is seen as it's okay to just have a kid and not be with the person that you had a child with, to not to build strong family structures. And what we know based on the statistics is that if children that don't grow up in strong family structures, they turn to the streets. They turn they turn to violence, they turn to sex. And guess who's waiting for them? The prison industrial complex is waiting to gobble them up. Right. And that's if, of course, you're a Republican. If you're a Democrat, you have all these social service initiatives that are all into your child, all into the family's business, right? Not allowing you to actually parent. So you're getting it on both ends. So I think we have to be extremely intentional on what we do and how we do it, so that we're raising our children up in a situation where they could get the type of warmth, not only in the household, but even from the community, but particularly from a cultural standpoint, to where their culture can be their immune system when they're living in a society that is, of course, vehemently anti-Black.
So let me ask you, should the Black family and the Black community, should they be basically reoriented to a more revolutionary stance to fight against oppression, as opposed to just basically succumbing to these different outcomes, to where we're having few people making positive choices, basically the symptoms from what I'm seeing.
Yes, sir. And brother, I think you stated before that you are a huge fan and prolific reader of Dr. Amos Wilson, correct?
Yes.
All right, wonderful. So I'm holding up my Bible, Blueprint for Black Power. As I stated before, I've had this book for about 12 years. It's marked up like the subway in Harlem. It's falling apart.
Right.
In chapter 3, the social and cultural origins of power. I actually had my daughter read this section of the book this summer. She had to read it to me. Then we had to have a conversation about it. Then she had to get up and give a mini lecture on it. Like it's literally, I mean, she had to do this. She didn't have a choice, right? You do what I say, you don't eat, right? I'm joking. But on page 57, Dr. Amos Wilson, the late great Dr. Amos Wilson, master teacher Dr. Amos Wilson, has a section in chapter 3 entitled "The Family as a Power System." And so what he's arguing is that what many of our people need to understand is that having a strong family unit is a source of Black power.
It is.
I say, the family is a primary organization, a fundamental generator or source of power where the human and non-human capital resources of its members are pooled and shared as means of achieving its vital goals. These goals include sexual reproduction, socialization of its children, securing a common habitation, providing protection and affectional relations among its members, maintaining and enhancing the social status of its members, providing for their economic well-being. So my daughter, one of the questions she asked was, what does it mean by affectional relations? And I'm gonna show you all this picture. And I said, Z, this is what they mean by affectional relations. This is a picture of course, my son and daughter were like 7 and 5, right? When we were at a donut shop, and there was she kissed him, and he was screaming, let me go. And I was not eating donuts, just for my trainer to know, I was not eating the donuts. But that's the goal of a family unit. The goal of the Black family is power. It's not to emulate white folk.
That's right.
Produce power. And he breaks down what the goals are of a Black family unit: affectional relations, reproduction, right? Securing a cohabitation. You learn how to live together, right? You know, you got 5 kids. I grew up in a family of three children, right? You learn how to get along, right?
That's right.
You love a person even when you disagree with them. You ain't going nowhere. You still better look out for each other. You still better protect each other. And you still better care about each other. If not, you're going to deal with mom and dad. Right? Come on now.
That's right. That's right.
Learn how to have a healthy relationship, because if you don't get along correctly, guess what's going to happen? Mom and dad going to tap that ass. I remember growing up where we used to say stuff like, hey, let me get some of your potato chips. And we'd be like, no. Then we'd be like, some type of brother you are, some type of sister you are. My mom heard us saying this. She said, you better stop talking to each other that way, or I'm going to get a hold of you.
That's right.
Right.
We'd say stuff like, hey, can you go get me some water? They bring us some water and some pop out. We were like, thank you, my faithful slave. Right? You know, I mean, we was kids, used to do stuff like that.
Right.
You know, I don't be talking to each other like that. So you learn how to treat each other in a loving and caring and compassionate manner. Right?
That's
you
right.
learn how to work together to secure the benefit of what the group, not just the individual. Right? You focus on what not only maintain your social status, but elevating your social status. Right?
That's right.
My dad being a preacher, my mom being a preacher. When my mom had a speaking engagement, my dad had a speaking engagement. We as a family helped them prep. When my sister was running track or had a clarinet recital, we all helped her prep. When my brother had some type of event, we helped them prep. When I had an event, we all helped us prep. So it was a concept of working together for the benefit of the group.
That's right.
Right. And so that's
right.
Our warrior scholar, our great ancestor, was teaching us when he talked about the family being a system of power, the basis of Black power. It's not because we're trying to emulate whites, them folks, because the reality is, as Brother Alexander said about an hour ago, they really emulating us. That's right. That's not rhetoric. This is rooted in facts.
Right. And then let's talk about that. I don't mean to cut you off, brother, but then even like in my family dynamics, when I'm talking to my 5 children and they're like, Daddy, you've been with mommy for 21 years? Wow. You've been married for 13 years? Yeah, mommy was my best friend. We dated for 8 years before we got married. And then even having that concept of like, oh man, you guys didn't have kids right away? You guys were married 2 years before you had your first kid? You guys were together for 8 years before you got married? Like, we talked a lot. We got to talk. And that's the thing, like in these relationships nowadays, everything is such at a fast pace. Everybody's going so fast. They don't want to take the time to get to know people anymore. You know, like even
so I got both back. I'm sorry, go ahead.
Go ahead, brother Nate.
I wanted to ask you both a question since from what I see, you guys are both successfully married. You guys have careers.
Actually, I'm not married. I'm divorced.
Oh, okay. Well, you guys have had families or have been married. You know, you guys are, you know, going into your careers and have careers. So do you attribute that to your personal upbringing, your personal moral choices, or how did you just defy the norms around you?
Well, I would say this, that, you know, my best friend and I, we actually met 34 years ago today, September 1st, 1988, we met in first grade at Jefferson Elementary School, right? Building, the small building, building 2. And one of the things we always say that when we grew up, and Brother Alexander, you probably could speak to this, that we were the last of the Mohicans, right? We were really the last generation of Black men who grew up with their fathers in the household, and that was the norm, right? Being a child of the early 80s, right? And so for me growing up, it was normal for me to go over my friend's house and their father was there. And even though their dad probably didn't know my dad, but the structure and the expectations of my behavior was the same, right? So don't be acting like you ain't got no sense. You better keep your voice down. Don't be running all around my house, yada, yada, yada. I could recall, true story, I was 8 years old. I did my chores Saturday morning, and I was like, hey, I'm going over to my friend Jeffrey's house. But I didn't actually tell my parents. I had to ask. They said yes. So we're over there. I'm at his house, and we're in his living room playing with some trucks on the ground. His dad comes in and says, hey, did you clean your room yet? And my homeboy Jeffrey was like, nah, I'm finna to. His dad looked at me and said, goodbye, young man. So I went back home because we didn't live across the alley from each other.
Right.
So, what happened? I thought you was at Jeffrey's house. I said, he got in trouble for not cleaning his room. They was like, oh, okay. So he came back an hour later like, hey, man, we good now. You can come back over. So it was just the expectations of the fathers in the community were the same no matter whose house I went to. And so there was a normalization of that. And then one of the elder brothers, one of my mentors who's in up his 50s told me, he says, the only way you can have Black men going around the community, acting like miscreants, being unproductive, is that there's a lack of masculinity in the community. Because when there are men in the community, you can have young men, by and large, just walking around doing nothing with their lives, and no one's going to G-check their ass and say, what the F are you doing with your stuff? It doesn't happen. My sister said she was born in 1990, true story, and I'm going to pass over to Brother Alexander. In 1990, I was in first grade. And I remember this, I recall this, what ended up taking place was, it was the last day of first grade. I'm walking home and I cut through somebody's yard. And when I got home, my parents knew about it. And I had to walk all the way back to that person's house, knock on the door and apologize. I'm like, how the hell do they even know my parents? How do they even know me? This actually happened in 1990.
Wow.
Literally.
For me, where my success came from is a combination of when preparation meets opportunity, having a strong mother who pushed me to excel, who planted the seed or even the idea that quitting was never an option. Do you understand? So when I start things, it's never been an option to quit them. So, for example, it took me 7 years to get a college degree. But then through that is having a good partner, my wife, encouraging me. Hey, I don't know if I could be with somebody that doesn't have a college degree. Planting those type of seeds. Having people tell you that you have potential or that they see something in you. That's power. And even just like older brothers just reaching back to me and being like, hey, Menelek, you're doing a good job, man. Keep it up. You know, for example, having a good social system. So even now that I'm 41, I've got a good group of brothers that support me in my life, and that's what makes me successful. Because I have people who believe in me, who believe in my dreams, who support me in my dreams, and will even financially support me when it comes to my dreams. I have I hope you don't mind. I have a podcast. It's on Spotify. The name of the podcast is called Uncles. If you look for it, okay, I can do that. The name is called Uncles. We're on Spotify right now. We're number 1 on Spotify. We talk about personal development. We talk about having a why, understanding your purpose, and then we have different topics that we go through. So one topic was understanding grief. Another topic was adding value. How do you add value? Are you adding value to your life? Are you using the right keys to unlock the right doors in your life so you could be successful? So that's why I'm successful, because I'm only a reflection of the people around me. And that's even being a stay-at-home father in this society, as a black man, there's so much pressure on you to be the breadwinner or to live up to some kind of certain standard. And if it wasn't for my community of people, I might not be as mentally strong as I am. If it wasn't for them telling me, hey man, you're a good dad, you're doing something good with your family. I wish I could do that. Man, that's the encouragement that you need to be successful. So that's to answer your question. The only reason why I'm successful and to this stature of my life is because of the community of people who have entrusted me with knowledge and information to pick up this bloodstained banner and to carry it. That's really the science behind it all. Is believing in yourself, having confidence, taking a chance.
Absolutely.
Because that's.
And you know what Marcus Garvey stated? We talking about the Pan-Africanist leader, Jamaican national hero. What did he say? What did he say? He stated that if you lack confidence in self, you are defeated in the race of life.
That's right.
Twice. He said, but if you have confidence, you have won the race before it has even begun. And we know that part of anti-Black racism, part of systemic racism, part of white supremacy, starting from 1492 when Columbus so-called sailed that monkey-ass ocean blue.
That's right.
It was to strip Black people of our confidence in self. But as our ancestors did, right, over 200 some years ago, in that island country of Haiti, they refused to acquiesce their humanity. They refused to acquiesce their African entity. And they believed that if they believed in themselves, that they could overcome their oppressors. And of course they did, and they created the first Black republic in the Western Hemisphere, known as the island country of Haiti. And as a result, that brought forth the ideology and movement that we now know and call Pan-Africanism. So I want to state that one more quote from Marcus Garvey, that he taught us that even under the most severe conditions, we should never hate or dislike ourselves. And I think this is something that we have to understand, that no matter what we're going through, we shall never hate or dislike ourselves, right? So I appreciate everyone for coming out. Make sure you hit the subscribe and the like button. Here at LaMumbaSpeaks.com, we are a Black empowerment initiative where we always bet on Black. We believe we could gain a competitive advantage in a global society and a global economy by always betting on Black. Please go to LaMumbaSpeaks.com to learn more. Real quick, if you all are interested in where I got the shirt, my soulmate is Black, my Lambo is blue, but I'll be goddamn if my Ram thing too. Right, my mama at home and my daddy ain't in jail. Right, everybody putting in work. Okay, and we ain't never seen the scale. All right. So with that being said, you can go to carriejohnson.com to get a T-shirt. My soulmate is Black. So final thoughts from anyone in the chat, and then of course the panel, and then we're going to call it a good night.
Yeah, I just want to tell you guys, man, thank you again for this discussion. I appreciate you for these in-depth, enlightening discussions.
Yes, sir.
Because there's not a whole lot on YouTube these days. I mean, just to have, just some solid understanding, some good, heart-to-heart talks on what is really happening in our communities. So I just want to thank you again, and I appreciate you, brother Menelek, for your answer, man. I admire you guys' success.
Thank you, and continued success to you too, brother.
And make sure you put the link to your Spotify, the name of it, and everything in the chat.
I'll do better. I copied the link and put it in there, but I got to do better. Okay. I'll do it now.
Okay, very good, very good. One last time, just want to let everyone know you're watching LaMumbaSpeaks.com on YouTube, a Black Empowerment Initiative where we believe we can gain a competitive advantage by always betting on Black. Make sure you hit the subscribe and like button. As I said it before, we got the HBO special going on. That's called Help Your Brother Out, right? We're trying to get subscribers. So if you could do your part, that'll be greatly appreciated. Love the conversation we had this evening. I gotta lay it down because I gotta get up, go to work in the morning, right?
Yes, sir.
But with that being said, please tap back in Sunday evening where we're going to be having a conversation where we're going to talk about Kevin Samuels and did he help or hurt the Black community? I think there'll be a lot of vibrant opinions about Mr. Samuels and what his platform and what he was disseminating. So please tap back in. Look forward to seeing you all Sunday at 8 o'clock.
Yes, sir.
All right. Until next time, y'all know what to do. Always bet on Black. Peace.
Peace.
Peace out.